Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to basically look at how you can interpret your MBME results to make sure that you're improving your scores quickly as possible. So let's say you've written your MBME result, right? Your MBME exam. You've taken an MBME, you have your result back from your school, your result is not satisfactory, you're not happy with the score, you need to do something to improve quickly, and you don't have all the time in the world. Your exam is in 6 weeks, 1 month, 8 weeks, whatever the case is. How do you interpret, or what do you make out of your MBME result to make sure you can make the appropriate changes? And we are going to jump right in. So this is a student's result right here. This student had a 66 on this particular report. This is from a pretty recent MBME, right? The student had a 66. Now, what you want to do is look at the breakdown that the MBME has given you. You're going to have your own score. Of course, you're going to see your score, and then you're going to see how the group, everybody else that took the MBME, generally performed. And this is a good metric for you to know where you are at, right? So on average, for example, applying foundational science concepts, people are scoring 71%. Well, a lot of people, that is. On making diagnosis, people are scoring around 77%. When it comes to practice-based learning, people are scoring 77%. What I tell my students generally is that for each of these sections, and with every section of the MBME, you want to be scoring at least a 65%. At least a 65%. If you score a 65% uniform all through, you will pass the exam. And since step one is pass or fail, for the most part, a lot of students are not trying to score 240 or anything. You're just trying to pass the exam and get out of the way, especially if you don't have all the time in the world. So if you can get a minimum of 65% on everything, you're going to be good. Now, this student scored a 63% in applying foundational science concept. What does that even mean? So foundational science concept is your basic knowledge. Basic part, basic farm. Things like basic principles, general principles in microbiology, in pathology, in pharmacology, in biochemistry, the general principles. Those are what count as foundational science concepts. And the better you understand general principles, the better you're going to perform on this aspect. So you should work on that general pathology, general pharmacology, and the introduction to microbiology, for example. All of those very basic things are going to play an important role when it comes to improving your score in this area. Now you can walk through this, making diagnosis. Diagnosis is the most important thing when it comes to step one, step two, especially step 2 CK. You want to be able to score very well in the diagnosis section. I tell my students that generally if you score an 80 in diagnosis, you will pass. You are very likely to pass. If you hit an 80 on the diagnosis part of this, you are probably going to pass that MBME, more than likely. It's very difficult to get an 80 on the diagnosis section and not score well in other areas enough to pass, right? So you want to practice and learn how to arrive at the correct diagnosis most of the time when you answer VNet questions. Test taking mastery is going to be out by the end of May, right? That course is going to be released by the end of May. That course is going to teach you exactly how to reach diagnosis correctly most of the time. So you're going to go through your scores. You go to the subject section, you go through the scores. When you look at these students' results, for example, you're going to see that, for example, this is 58, 48, 57, 77, 57, 84, 79, and so on. You're looking at all of these results. Now what? What I need you to do is to break them down into tiers. We are going to have 3 tiers. In some cases, you may need to have 4, but at least you should have 3 tiers. Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Now, remember, we are assuming that you don't have all the time in the world to start studying for everything, start reviewing every single thing in the books. You want to work on important areas so that you can make progress. In Tier 1, we are going to have the subjects where you performed the highest. So, for example, for this student, she got a 78 in renal and respiratory, a 77 in immunology, an 84 in musculoskeletal, a 79 in cardiovascular system, and 82 in gastroenterology. So these are excellent performances, very good performances, and all of these are going to be under Tier 1. I like Tier 1 maybe to be subjects that are greater than 70%. So if you score greater than 70% in a particular area, then you can put it under Tier 1. If you score less than 60%, less than 60% or greater than 50%, in a particular area, then that will come under tier 2. So for example, 58 here will come under tier 2. 57 under tier 2. 57 here, the person, endocrine, reproductive, multi-process system and disorders, general principles. These are going to be tier 2 kind of subjects, right? We have pharmacology here as well. Genetics. These are going to be tier 2. So you are going to write out those subjects under tier 2. And tier 3 are going to be subjects where you scored less than 50%. I hope there is not a lot of subjects under tier 3, but it doesn't matter. Subjects where you scored less than 50% should fall under tier 3. Here in this student's case, you have this nervous system. So neuro is a deficiency for these students, right? 48%, that's less than 50%. We have biostatistics and epidemiology, 44%, that's less than 50%. So those two subjects will go under tier 3 here. So we are going to have neurology, and biostatistics. Now, the good thing with this result is that this student already passed, right? This result is technically a passing result. But there are a lot of you that are going to have 2 or 3 more subjects under this area when you are preparing for your exam. And for some of you, you're not even going to have any subjects over greater than 70. That's fine. Some of you may need to have, okay, tier 1 is subjects that are greater than 60%. Some of you, tier 1 will be subjects that are greater than 50%. Depending on how well you performed in general, you're going to have different subjects or different grading of your tiers, right? If your highest score was 65 or 60, then your tier 1 is going to be subjects greater than 50%. Your tier 2 will be subjects greater than 40%. Your tier 3 will be subjects greater than 30%. Either way, if you have a very short time until your exam, then you have to make the decision on what you want to work on in the short time you have. Let's say your exam is coming up in 2 weeks. You've been studying for a while. You've taken this self-assessment in anticipation of your exam next week Friday or next 2 weeks Friday. You don't have the time to go and study all these subjects. You have to make the decision. Do you want to improve your weakest areas, or do you want to further improve your strong areas? Now, if your tier 1 subjects are greater than 60% or say 55%, or 50%, right? If your tier 1 subjects are greater than 50%, then I think the best thing for you to do would be to work on those tier 1 subjects. How do you work on them? Go on UWorld and do individual blocks on your tier 1 subjects. So if you have cardio, for example, here, respiratory here, renal here, but in all these subjects you are scoring 55, 54, 62, then you want to go to UWorld and do a block of cardiovascular system, a block of renal system, a block of respiratory system, and review those blocks effectively. You can do blocks on those 3 subjects. You can mix them together, just those 3 subjects, and do blocks on them and master them as well as possible, so that the next time you take an MBME, your cardiovascular system may become a 65 or even a 70%. Your respiratory can become a 55, a 65, 70%. Your renal can become a 70% as well. The reality is, if you can score very high on certain areas, even if you don't score so well on other areas, they don't affect your performance as much. Do you get it? So if in neuro, look at this student. Her neuro was a 48%. That's a pretty bad score. Her biostatistics was a 44%. That's a pretty bad score. But the other performances are so high that they're able to support and make sure that the student passes the exam nonetheless. We would have a problem if you have a lot of 40s and 50s on this result, for example. Now you can't go and start studying every single thing. So when you break them down into tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, you make the decision, okay, I have 5 subjects in tier 1. They are between 50 and 60%. I think I should work on these 5 subjects for the next 3-4 days. I'm going to do blocks of UWorld on these particular areas, master them as much as possible. If I have more time, I can do a few more subjects in the tier 3 group as well, or the tier 2 group as well. Right? So take your MBME results, break down your performances like this. If your tier 1 subjects are greater than 70%, you don't need to worry about them. You should work on these areas, your tier 3 subjects. Like this student, for example, she needs to work on neurology. She needs to work on biostatistics. She does not need to spend time reviewing cardiovascular system or gastroenterology where she scored an 82%. I hope this makes sense. When you break them down like this, it becomes very obvious what you need to be working on and what you can afford to not work on immediately. After working on these tier 3 subjects, you take another self-assessment. One of the mistakes students make is that they take a self-assessment, you review that self-assessment, which is very important. You should review that self-assessment as well as possible. And then you just take another self-assessment. That is okay if your exam is in 1 week and you don't have time to even review anything by yourself, or in 2 days. But if you have a few weeks, try to review certain subjects by themselves, especially those subjects where you did not perform so well. Your tier 3 subjects, if you're scoring above a 60% on the MBME, that means you're going to probably need to work on your tier 3 subjects more. A student like this student had a 66% here. She had a 66% on this result. This student should, based on this result, be working on her tier 3 subject, neuro biostatistics. Those are going to be the most important one. After that, she needs to work on genetics, 51, right? Those are the subjects that are most important. Those are the subjects she needs to put her most effort in over the next few weeks. She needs to work on biochemistry, of course, as well. So you see, just by breaking them down into tiers, you know what to work on. You don't need to go back and start reviewing everything together, or just do the mixed blocks. When you do mixed blocks, you don't work on anything. If you're doing mixed blocks, then you're not focusing on your weaknesses. You're not improving your weaknesses. Your strengths will continue showing up as strengths. Your weaknesses will continue showing up as weaknesses. You just keep reviewing the blocks, or the blocks of questions you're doing, or the MBME or whatever, without focusing on anything in particular. So once again, divide them into tiers. Work on especially your tier 3 subjects if your tier 1 subjects are above 70%. If your tier 1 subjects are 50% to 60%, then you should work on your tier 1 subjects first, and then work on your tier 3 subjects if you have time. I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions about this, any questions about how to interpret your MBME result, leave them in the comments below. You can send me a message. You can reach me on Instagram, and I would do well to answer your questions as much as possible if I see them. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you guys in the next video. Remember to subscribe, like the video, give us a thumbs up, and I'll catch you soon. Okay.